Welcome to the Price of Eggs. I'm Gary Turnbull with Predictify, and this is where we keep score on the Trump 2.0 economy. Things are crazy out there with Doge and tariffs on, tariffs off. We're just going to cut through the noise and look at the results. Let's get started. We are going to grade the Trump 2.0 economy with 10 common, well-known economic metrics. They're easily verified, easy to find anywhere, and they're very familiar to pretty much everybody. One caveat is we're going to keep an eye on the numbers coming out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's some concern that if those numbers turn negative against Trump, that he'll either try to suppress them or cook the numbers a little bit. If I get wind of any of that kind of shenanigans, I'll certainly bring it to your attention. Our first metric is, the price of eggs. As I'm sure you've all seen in the news lately, price of eggs have continued to increase. Our baseline for the purposes of this contest is $4.15. There's a little wiggle room in there, but the actual $4.95 was well outside that wiggle room. So Mr. Trump loses that metric this month. The next metric is the price of gas, something we all feel every week, probably. Our baseline for the price of gas is $3.10. Again, we've got a little wiggle room in there. The actual was $3.09, so it's pretty much right in line with where it's been. So that's a tie for the month for Mr. Trump. The next metric is the Consumer Price Index, something everybody pays quite a bit of attention to since inflation's been such a big issue the last year or two or three. Consumer Price Index just released was 3.0%, which is right at the top edge of our wiggle room range. So it's a tie for this month, but it's on the verge of going into a loss for Trump. We'll see what happens in February. Next, the unemployment rate is still pretty darn good. The actual came in at 4. Our range is 4 to 5. So we're in pretty good shape. So that's a tie for Mr. Trump again. Next, we move on to the 30-year mortgage rate. They've been pretty stable for quite a while, right around 7%. Our baseline range is 6.8 to 7.2. The actual is 6.95. So again, we have a tie for Mr. Trump. Next metric is the Dow Industrial Index. Now, for all three stock indices, the baseline increases by the 50-year expected increase per month. So it's a little bit of a moving target, but stock should trend upward on a continual basis. So in January, the baseline or the target was 43,625. The actual was 44,545. So that's a win for Mr. Trump. Next, we move on to the S&P 500. Baseline 6,019. The actual was 6,041. So another win for Mr. Trump. The third stock indices is the NASDAQ, which the baseline was 19,704. Actual was 19,627. So a loss for Trump. Next, we move on to Bitcoin. I included Bitcoin. Well, initially I was going to, but I was talking to someone about what I was proposing to do. And they said, Bitcoin is on the minds of so many people that you really should include it. And I thought, it's part of the zeitgeist of the economy now. So I ultimately agreed. So Bitcoin, the baseline, the value of Bitcoin on Trump's inauguration day was 104,642. The actual was 102,405 at the end of January. So that's a loss for Mr. Trump. Next, our next metric is GDP growth. GDP growth results are released quarterly, so I'll backfill that result in April when those results are released. So, how did Trump do for the month of January? I realize it's a partial month and the numbers kind of bleed from the Biden administration into the Trump administration, but that's all going to wash out pretty quickly. So the results are Trump lost 3 of the metrics, tied 4 of the metrics, and won 2 of the metrics. Each metric is worth 10 points, so he actually lost 10 points total. Now, what we're going to compare Trump to is 2 metrics, the Consumer Sentiment Index and the 538 Presidential Approval Poll. And what we can see is that the CSI went down by about 4 points, actually. So that wasn't a good result. The 538 Presidential Approval Poll went down about 3 points in his net favorability. So the changes in those comparison metrics actually follow the loss of the month for Trump in points. So, my original theory was that those 2 comparison metrics are going to follow directly with my 10 economic metrics, and that's proven to be true so far. We'll see what happens next month. So, in conclusion, Trump gets the broken egg. It looks like Trumpty Dumpty fell off the wall. I'm Gary Turnbull, and I look forward to talking to you next month.